It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna time. The first half of the New York Mets season is over. This 6-game homestand against Washington and Colorado, over. We get ourselves a little bit of a break, a little bit of a chance to take a deep breath and look back at the accomplishment of the Mets turning their season around. This was what turned out to be a successful first half of the year. This certainly turned out to be a very successful homestand, going 5-1. And even though you hate to lose on a Sunday afternoon to the crappy Colorado Rockies, and I hope this doesn't come across like a loser mentality, because obviously you want to win every single game you play, but this felt like a loss on Sunday even before it started. And I remember saying to my dad and my wife, we all went to the game, and my youngest son, you know what? As long as they're not blowing the game in the ninth inning, as long as it's not some kind of catastrophic loss, it's okay. They have done the job that they needed to do on this homestand. As we said, coming into this homestand against Washington and Colorado, they needed to do serious damage. They needed to go into the All-Star break feeling good. They needed to go into the All-Star break above 500. They needed to win games at home consistently. And going 5-1 against Washington and Colorado, I would say they did that. Mission accomplished. There are things about Sunday's game we will get into that certainly pissed me off, and I'm sure pissed a lot of people off. But in general, the New York Mets had a very successful close to the first half of the season. We'll get into what that means for the second half. We'll build up the expectations this team has now created. But obviously, we'll look back at what happened in these 3 games against the Colorado Rockies. Let me start at the end because, look, you don't want a bad taste going into the All-Star break, and you certainly hope that a loss at the end of the first half of the year doesn't somehow turn into something bigger. I remember back in 2021, only 3 years ago, Sunday afternoon, it was my birthday, took the family to the game, had really bougie seats, and they blew a game late to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it was a bad loss, but the Mets were still in first place. I think they were about 4 or 5 games up at the time. And there was this sick feeling in my stomach of, is this going to be the game that really turns the whole season to crap? And look, there were other factors that led to that. Jacob deGrom not pitching again certainly was a big part of it. But when you think back to what happened in 2021 and how a once promising season went down the toilet, at least for me, one of the things I think about was the way they closed the first half. I don't look at this game. I mean, certainly not like the way the Yankees lost. I don't look at this game as one of those examples. But there were a few things from Sunday's game that leaves you saying WTF. Since we're going to use the OMGs, I respond with a WTF. Let me start with the way this game concludes. The Mets obviously gave up a ton of home runs in this game. We can get into Jose Quintana. We can get into Adrian Hauser being in this game way too long. We get all that. But the Mets put themselves in a hole, and they started to fight back. They actually showed a lot of promise, especially with the rallies they put together late. Even though they didn't score in the 6th, they got the leadoff man on. Even though they didn't score in the 7th, they got the first 2 guys on. That was a real killer too, by the way, because at that point, they're down 7-3. They get the first 2 guys on base with the heart of the order coming up, and Alvarez and Alonso struck out. Vientos struck out. They went down meekly. But they scored 2 runs in the 8th inning, and all of a sudden, it's an 8-5 game. And it's the Colorado Rockies, whose team ERA is about 35. So you go to the 9th inning. The Mets again pull a little rally together. Infield hit Mark Vientos. Jose Iglesias, unbelievable. 4th hit of the game. You get the tying run at the plate, and Tyrone Taylor is coming up. And I admit, I had a brain fart. I sat there, and I turned to my dad, and I said, boy, I'm actually mildly surprised that Mendy isn't going to DJ Stewart to try to hit a 3-run home run. It slipped my mind that JD Martinez was on the bench. And for me, I'm a fan. Look, at the end of the day, I may host the Rico Brogna. I ain't perfect. I'm not paid to manage this team, but I genuinely forgot JD Martinez was on the bench. That's okay for me. That ain't okay for Carlos Mendoza, because you need to explain to me how And I'll tell you, not that I want to go conspiracy theory crazy. There's enough people who have conspiracies coming out of this weekend. Like the fact that he doesn't use JD Martinez to pinch hit for Tyrone Taylor. And then Jeff McNeil was like surprised when Mendy called him back. He calls McNeil back, and it's as if JD Martinez was not ready to hit. So here's my conspiracy theory. Either JD Martinez was in the crapper, or Carlos Mendoza had no idea JD Martinez on his bench. Because that did not make any sense. Why would you use JD Martinez to pinch hit for Jeff McNeil, but not Tyrone Taylor? Jeff McNeil, again, had a quality day. He drew a pretty impressive walk in the fourth inning. He had the RBI double in the eighth inning, which actually was the only clutch hit the Mets got this entire game, at least with runners in scoring position. So not that I'm the president of the Jeff McNeil fan club, but it really doesn't make any sense that you would use JD Martinez to pinch hit for him, but not for Tyrone Taylor. Look, it didn't matter. JD Martinez struck out. So I understand that. I mean, it could have mattered, though, because if JD strikes out for Taylor, who knows what Jeff McNeil does? So that left me scratching my head. And I always love when I'm just confused by a move and then someone in the ballpark says, hey, Evan, why did Mendy blah, blah, blah? So in this case, hey, Evan, why did Mendy not use JD Martinez? And I turn around and I'm like, I have no freaking idea. I wish I knew. So that's number one in head scratcher from Carlos Mendoza. Number two, I guess would be the handling of the bullpen. Because think about it. You use Phil Maton after Jose Quintana really couldn't settle down. And I think that's the most disappointing aspect of this game, the finale of this series, that Quintana promptly puts them in a hole, giving up a 2-run home run to Ezequiel Tovar early in the game. The Mets fight back in the fourth inning. Quintana settles down, which he definitely deserves credit for, and is given a new lease on life. That 2-run deficit he put them in the hole for, the Mets were able to erase when Pete Alonso hit the 2-run home run, and they got the Francisco Lindor bases loaded walk. And what does Jose Quintana do? He pulls a Tommy Glavine, in which shutdown inning, he has a lead, and he very quickly gives up a home run, gives it right back to, what's his name? The dude who had 3 home runs in this game, Michael Toglia, who just destroyed the Mets all weekend long. I mean, the Rockies, give the Colorado Rockies credit for this. They go on the road and they hit how many home runs? They hit 12 home runs in 3 games. 4 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and then 6 on Sunday. And Toglia hit 4 of them. So disappointing that Quintana's given a new lease on life, promptly gives up a game-tying home run. Not the end of the world, though. Go get through the 6th inning, and you've just put together a quality performance. And what does he do? First pitch of the 6th inning gives up a home run to Brenton Doyle. And that's not all. He got lucky that Harrison Bader made a great diving catch. Then he gives up another home run to Toglia. So Quintana, to me, if I'm making a list of the things that disappointed me from the finale of this series, he's probably number one in that he couldn't build off his consistency over the last few weeks. And he just gave it all back. Mets fight, give him some runs. He gives up a bunch of home runs. He gave up 4 home runs in this game and puts the Mets in a hole. So that's disappointment number one. Mendy goes to Phil Maton. We're still figuring out that not look very good on Friday, but did look good the previous day. And he gets that strikeout and immediately takes him out. And I found that to be odd because you do have the All-Star break. So I do think that final game before the break, you can manage a little bit more aggressively with your bullpen because there is no Monday, there is no Tuesday, there is no Wednesday, there is no Thursday. You can be a little bit more aggressive. He takes Maton out after just 1 out, after a handful of pitches. And then he goes to Adrian Hauser. And let's just be honest about Adrian Hauser. We almost forgot about him because Hauser got off to this terrible start as a starting pitcher. A credit to the Mets. They pulled him out of the rotation pretty quickly. And then they move him to the bullpen. And we start to see him become like this useful long reliever out of the bullpen. And for a while, that's exactly what he was. He would come out of the bullpen. He'd pitch 2-3 innings at a time. and usually would do a pretty good job of keeping the Mets in the game. He has now had back-to-back bad performances out of the bullpen. The loss on the 4th of July when he gave up the home run to Jesse Winker, and then whatever the hell you want to call this crap. Gives up a 2-run home run to Ezekiel Tovar. That's bad enough. Gives up the 3rd home run to Michael Toglia, and takes a game that is relatively close. Because, look, when you're facing Colorado and you're down 5-3, you're not out of the game. Not against that bullpen and not with the way the Mets have been hitting. And Hauser gave up the insurance. And as you saw as the Mets were rallying, I'm muttering to my dad, man, every insurance run they gave up was so big. So my question for Mendy would be this. All right, you go to Adrian Hauser. He has a shaky 7th inning. Why not take him out? Like, do you need to save your bullpen? What are you saving it for? I mean, we all get that Jose Budo is not going to be available in Sunday's game because of his brilliance on Saturday. The same thing with Dednell Nunez. But you do have other guys. And as much as I may not love Adam Ottavino or Eric Orzi and Danny Young, who eventually went to, and Edwin Diaz, who you can go to, did not pitch Saturday, you see Hauser stinks. You see he's given up the long ball. Why the need to stick with him? I think if this was a middle-of-the-week game or a game that wasn't surrounded by the All-Star game, I probably would give the defensive Mendy by saying, you know what? You got to be smart. You got to play the long game. But in this case, it didn't make a lot of sense. So I thought those were the two big faux pas. Outside of that, I got to tell you, I like the lineup. If you really feel the need that JD Martinez needs an off day, if you at least go with that conclusion, because I love finding ways for Jose Iglesias to play. And hopefully coming out of the break, Mendy's going to realize that. The excuse that they've been using the last couple of games that he hasn't started has been he's not feeling well, he had an IV, all this kind of crap. When he comes back out of the break, and certainly I don't expect Jose Iglesias to continue hitting 350, 360 or something, but his defense, he's so smooth. Whether he's at third base or second base, he looks great. And Jeff McNeil, as much as, I don't have faith in him, and if you can get something from him at the deadline, you've got to think about it. He is probably your best option in right field. Right now, he is. Tyrone Taylor has cooled off. DJ Stewart stinks. Of the current guys on this roster, I'll phrase it that way because obviously they can use a piece, and the Nationals have indicated they're selling. Jeff McNeil is their best option in right field. So disappointing Sunday loss. Those are the questions I have. And look, the Mets also missed a million opportunities. They went 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position in this game. And I think the real opportunity they missed was in the 4th inning. The 4th inning was some inning too, because like I said, I took my youngest son to the game, Spence, and he wanted ice cream in that inning. So that was our ice cream line inning. We did see the Pete home run on the TV screen. I love that about Citi Field and these newer ballparks. When I would send my poor dad, when I was Spence's age, who was 3, and I'd say, Dad, ice cream, ice cream. And he would go get ice cream at Chase Stadium. He would miss whatever he missed. But at Citi Field, because they got TVs everywhere, at least you're able to experience it. So that was a great moment. On the line to get the Mr. Softy, Spence wearing his Pete Alonso jersey, very excited that Pete Alonso hit a home run. As was I. As was every Met fan. It's good to see Pete do that, his 19th home run of the season going into the All-Star break. But a ton of missed opportunities. In that inning, he hits the 2-run home run. They load the bases up with 1 out. And Harrison Bader, who has had a very good first half, so tough to pick on guys, but he had a terrible game, pops up with the bases loaded on the first pitch. Even after Francisco Lindor draws the bases loaded walk, Brandon Nimmo grounds out. But I mentioned the 7th inning when they got the first 2 guys on base, and then Alvarez, Alonso, Vientos all strike out back-to-back-to-back. 1 for 13 was the official number with runners in scoring position. So when you give up 6 home runs in a game and you go 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position, I don't have the stats, but I can promise you your record is bad. You're usually not going to win those games. As far as Saturday is concerned, boy, Saturday was on a lot of levels a very, very surreal afternoon. I went to a birthday party, but it was one of those birthday parties where there were a lot of adults there, and the family who was having this birthday party, not just Met fans, but die-hard Met fans. So it was one of those rare instances, Pete, where usually when I do things with my family on a Saturday, I DVR the game. No big deal. Just DVR the game. I'll watch it a little bit later on. That was not going to happen in this case because they're diehard Met fans. And listen, as weird as I am, and I'm a weird guy, I will never go over to somebody's house and say, hey, don't put the Met game on. I've got to DVR it. And I have to admit, I felt like a normal human being on Saturday because they put the game on outside. Kids are playing. I'm playing a little bit too, having a few drinks, but the game is on. And there's a lot of Met fans there. So it was like almost a watch party in a lot of ways. And so I did not score the game, but I felt like a regular human being enjoying the Met game with other people and not DVRing it on a Saturday afternoon. And I'm proud of myself.
Honestly, tell me how it feels to be a normal person for a change.
Well, I liked it. I liked it. Would I still prefer to be able to sit in my cocoon and score a game? Yes. But look, on a lot of levels, and let's not mess around here, that was also during that game the moment where everybody's phone is buzzing about what happened to former President Trump. So that became like a big part of the party because people are like, holy crap, what the hell happened? And I'll never forget now the first thing someone said, and I don't think they were doing it to be mean or anything like that. The first thing they said is this AI? Which is the scary part about the world we're living in, right? That your first reaction to seeing an assassination attempt on a former president and a presidential candidate is to say, is this real? It's kind of like when we see sports news reported and we're like, is this a fake account? This is a video. And our first assumption is it fake? But yeah, so you have the game, but then you also have everybody like, what the hell's going on? Everybody checking their phone. I will say no one flipped the channel though off the Met game. I guess with phone information, that was probably where you were going to get it anyway. But obviously Saturday was a crazy day, a scary day, that's for sure. And two people lost their lives. And by two people, I don't mean actually one person lost their life because I didn't even count the assassin. That scumbag deserved to lose his life. But I think we have heard about people losing their lives. So it's obviously very, very tragic. But as far as watching the game with other people is concerned and not scoring it, yeah, it felt like a human. You know what the best part was? When Budo comes in and then Deadnell seals the deal, especially when Budo got into trouble, it was a cool experience high-fiving other people and sharing our excitement over something good for the New York Mets. I like that, Pete.
It's different than being by yourself and just high-fiving yourself for change.
Yeah. It's very different than high-fiving myself and also seeing something happen 3 hours after the fact, which is the case on DVR.
Yeah, I got to tell you something because I spend a lot of time watching games with other people because I can't do that. Like I can't
understand.
I have to watch it live. I'll get people around. Like again, I had people over my house yesterday too, so that was something that was. It just was. We were socializing. It is what it is, but it feels cool to just be able to socialize and watch sports and all react together and have that be part of the conversation too. Because when you watch it by yourself, man, like I know it for someone that just takes in every piece of information, it has a different feel to it. It has a different setting. It's like we're all doing this together. We're all part of the same team, I guess.
Absolutely. No, that part I have no complaints about. I think that, when you've got kids running around and it's a social environment, you're just not able to watch every single pitch. So I think I miss that because I like watching every single pitch. But you are right. Like sharing in the enjoyment of Jose Budo being just a dog out of the bullpen and Deadnell Nunez getting those big strikeouts and then Francisco Lindor hitting the big 3-run home run late. It's cool. It's a nice bonding experience for all of us. But it was a very good victory. It was interesting because going into that game, I saw the lineup, and I think I even tweeted this where I said, this is a heat check lineup from Carlos Mendoza. What I mean by that, for those that don't love basketball, was sometimes when you're hitting threes at such an amazing clip, you'll just pull up from half court and be like, I'm so hot. let me just see how hot I am. When you look at that lineup in game 2 of this series, with the Mets on a hot streak, with the Mets playing really well, and then you see DJ Stewart batting 5th, and you see Ben Gamel batting 7th and playing left field, and no Jose Iglesias, always still not feeling well. You look at that lineup, and you're like, oh my God, is Mendy getting cocky or something? I think we've gotten to the point where it's got to be it for DJ Stewart. He did have a hit in this game, and he got on base a couple of times, but let's not be fooled. He's a 170 hitter. How he's still on this team. And then batting 5th. I mean, let's think about that for a second. DJ Stewart is hitting ahead of Mark Vientos. Granted, Vientos took it 0-4. And then Ben Gamel, who also, I give him credit, he got on base a couple of times, including that big walk late. But it felt like a very heat check lineup by Carlos Mendoza. I don't disagree with his handling of Christian Scott. Christian was very mediocre after a quick start, gave up a couple of home runs, which was really the story of this series when you look at how many Colorado hit. But Jose Butto is a weapon. And I think what's going to be interesting is how they use him. You know, I think I would lean towards keeping him as this multi-inning guy, as the weapon who can come in and get the 8 outs that he got, which is what we saw. He comes into a tricky spot with guys on base, gets through the 5th inning, pitches a clean 6th, pitches a clean 7th, then he runs into trouble in the 8th, and Dednell Nunez just cleans it up. Another guy who is high leverage reliever and can get more than 3 outs. But I think with Butto, and I'm not sure if he'll ever be in a spot where they'd be comfortable using him on back-to-back days. He's still making that adjustment from a starting pitcher. But this kind of reminds me of Seth Lugo back in, I guess it was 17 and 18, when you had this real weapon out of the bullpen, and you just got to figure out how you're going to use him. You know, are you good knowing you can't use that weapon on back-to-back days? Because if he's never going to be able to pitch on back-to-back days, then why waste just getting an inning out of him? If he pitches a clean inning, like we saw him get through the 5th and get through the 6th, ride it. And the truth is, we'll never know this because he did get into trouble. Maybe he would have finished the game. I mean, that's entirely possible. Now, the longer you go, the more you're not going to have the guy. But I think in this case, with it being the Saturday before the All-Star game, Jose Butto wasn't pitching Sunday no matter what. So you may as well get the most out of him. But I would continue to use him as a guy who, when he comes into a game, may get 8 outs, maybe more, because he's clearly capable of doing it. He is a starting pitcher. He is stretched out. I think that's how they have to use him. But right now, this Met bullpen has 2.5 guys you trust. That's how I would phrase it. I think you trust Jose Butto. It's a handful of performances, but he's been great in all of them. You trust Dednell Nunez, and you're halfways with Edwin Diaz. You're almost there. I mean, look at Friday. Friday night was so freaking infuriating with Edwin Diaz. I went to Friday night's game as well, me and my oldest son. That's how we work now. We split them up. Take one son one game, one son the other game, because if they're together, I think a lot of parents know this, things can get very, very bad. But on Friday night, we go to the game. We see that Michael Toglia hit a 2-run home run. I mentioned how many did he hit in this series? 4 over the weekend. So we see Manaea give up the early runs. The Mets respond immediately. Vientos, Iglesias back-to-back. Bader hits a bomb. Mets are hitting home runs all over the place. Bader hits a second bomb. Iglesias hits a second bomb. And they build themselves up this 7-2 lead, which sort of feels comfortable, right? Yeah, you're feeling pretty good. They stretch Manaea out for a 7th, clearly because, and this is where I'm with Mendy, and Mendy said this after the game, that the score was a part of the reason why Manaea came out for the 7th inning. Look, Sean Manaea, if you go back to the 6th, they were making pretty good contact against him, and his pitch count was 91. Under any other circumstances, 6 innings, 2 runs, 91 pitches, hard contact. He's coming out. Like, there's no way he's pitching the 7th inning, but I think Mendy looked at it and said, hey, I got a 7-2 lead. Maybe I can steal 3 outs. And that's exactly what he did, because he gives up the leadoff home run to Brendan Rodgers, and then he gets 3 outs, and he got 7 out of them. If that's a closer game, I don't think Manaea pitches the 7th inning, but I think because they had the big lead, Mendy said, let me push my luck just a little bit. And he was able to do it. And then we get the bullpen experience. You get 7 innings out of Sean Manaea. He gives up 3 runs. You have a 7-3 lead. You only need 6 outs. And here comes the full bullpen experience. Jake Diekman. And I apologize. I know what I said on a previous Rico. Remember what I said? Hey, just get him up there against lefties. His numbers are solid. He's good at that. Well, he came into a perfect lane. He's facing 2 out of 3 lefties. The first lefty he faced, Charlie Blackmon, home run. Then he faces the right. He gives up a double. And he does get the other lefty, Ryan McMahon, out. They say 2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 sucks because 2 out of the 3 base runners or batters against Jake Diekman got on base. So the Diekman experience goes away. Here comes Phil Maton, and Phil Maton joins the club of relievers we don't trust. Got lucky when Elias Diaz ripped a line drive right at Vientos and then gives up a bomb of a home run to Brenton Doyle. And all of a sudden, we have ourselves a 1-run game. When Edwin Diaz comes in, and look, I can't bitch about them at offense. They didn't do anything the last 3 innings. You score 8 runs, it should be enough. Or 7 runs, it should be enough. Diaz comes in, and this is why the Edwin Diaz roller coaster is reminiscent of every year he's been here outside of 2022. He gets the first 2 guys out and then walks Sam Hilliard on 4 freaking pitches. Gets ahead of Charlie Blackmon and he walks him. And then finally, with that entire building being stressed out, nice crowd, almost 30,000 people on a Friday night, he strikes out Ezekiel Tovar. He got the job done. Kudos to Edwin Diaz. He did not blow his 500th game of the season, but he did not make it easy. It was very, very stressful, and that's why I would include Edwin Diaz in that column of I sort of trust him, but not really. Look, the reality with Edwin Diaz is that no matter how you cut it, he's the guy getting the biggest outs. He is the 9th inning guy. He is the closer. And if the New York Mets are going to get a wild card spot, and as we stand here on this fine July evening or morning, depending on when you're listening, they're in a wild card spot. They're in the driver's seat. They need Edwin Diaz. Doesn't have to be 2022, but he needs to be one of the more reliable closers in baseball. Look, you look around baseball, a lot of closers are not reliable. Yankee fans right now are having a field day with Clay Holmes, even though it wasn't all his fault. But they are so going to need Edwin Diaz to figure it out. He cannot be the problem he was before he went on the Phantom IL.
I appreciate that view, but can I just dive into something with Edwin Diaz for a second? Because what made him so great in 2022 was the flexibility that Buck Showalter had with Edwin Diaz. Now, the fact that it wasn't just the 9th inning, it was the 7th inning, it was the 8th inning. Carlos Mendoza has made a point saying he's our closer. He's our 9th inning guy. There's he's going in there. If he's going in, he's getting 4 out saves, 5 out saves. He's not going into the 8th inning and facing the lineup, and then we're going to rely on somebody else.
You know what, though? But Pete, I don't. Let me just counter this. I don't know if that's true yet because, first of all, he isn't dominating. And I think that when Buck had him, he had a dominating Edwin Diaz. So he looked at him as the fireman where, hey, 1-run lead, heart of the order in the 8th inning. Let me go to my best reliever. Right now, he probably isn't their best reliever, as crazy as that sounds. Dednell Nunez and Jose Budo are their best relievers. But number 2, we haven't necessarily seen that situation yet where it's so obvious that you may want to use your best reliever, if he still considers him that, in that inning. Like, there seem to be so many opportunities for Buck Showalter in 2022, and I think there was one earlier this season that we may have commented on, but there haven't been a lot of those, like, situations where you would say, hey, go use Edwin Diaz in the 8th inning of a game. So I don't know if that's true that Mendoza won't. But then the other problem with it is I just don't know where Edwin Diaz is at in terms of the confidence to just use him like a Swiss Army knife wherever. They're trying to get him back on track mentally. And maybe a part of that is you're the ninth inning guy, don't overthink it. But then again, recently, he brought him in the eighth inning in a spot where he shouldn't have. I don't think Mendy's declared anything in terms of how he's going to use Edwin Diaz in a big spot.
I just like to see this bullpen work. So whatever it takes, that's all I care about.
Well, they need better arms. I mean, I hate to say it. Now, that's going to be the big focus during the All-Star break for a lot of Met fans. They got to go out and add arms. Now, let's address a trade that was made a couple of days ago, and that was the fact that Hunter Harvey was dealt from the Washington Nationals to the Kansas City Royals. The Nationals are a team that the Mets pretty much made sellers. They are a team that has a few pieces that I think the Mets could use. I've specifically mentioned the names Dylan Floro and Jesse Winker. Hunter Harvey, and this is concerning, by the way. What I'm about to say is not ideal. Hunter Harvey went for a lot. So think about this. The Kansas City Royals were able to trade a second-round pick in this upcoming draft. The reason they're able to do that is because in the MLB draft, there's an exception for trading picks for teams that hold competitive balance picks. All teams that have either one of the 10 smallest payrolls or revenue pools get an additional pick in the first or second round. So when you saw that trade and you saw, wait a second, how did the Washington Nationals acquire a draft pick? I wasn't familiar with baseball allowing draft pick trades. They don't, but they do allow it for these small revenue teams because they get these extra picks, these competitive balance picks, and those picks are allowed to be traded. So whenever a trade is made, I always like to say, hey, what's the comparison for the Mets? Like, what would have our price have been? Well, we can't trade a draft pick. So the Kansas City Royals offered something that the Mets cannot offer. That's point number one. Point number two, the kid they traded, Caden Wallace, a second-round pick from 2 years ago's draft, is the second best prospect in the Royals organization. So Kansas City traded their second best prospect and a very high draft pick for Hunter Harvey. That is an incredibly high price tag. And that's why when we've talked about adding relievers, I'm open to the idea of using a starting pitcher to go get a reliever. Because that kind of premium to pay, that's an awful lot. That's an awful lot for a guy like Hunter Harvey. So as we get closer to July 31st, we'll see what the price tag is. July 30th, to be exact. The deadline is actually the 30th this year. But we'll see what the price tags are. The Mets are going to have to use the power of the pocketbook. We've talked about that before. Using the power of the fact that Steve Cohen can afford to take back either a big contract from a relief pitcher they're acquiring or just taking back a bad contract. That's something that they can hopefully take advantage of. But the Hunter Harvey package, pretty expensive. Now let's get to some of your emails. The ricob@gmail.com is where you can send them. Negative Dan's got a pretty good email. Even after the loss on Sunday, the way this team closed out the first half means the hype coming out of the break is going to be enormous. I'm sorry if you don't think this is fair, but for as much as Lindor and Nimmo have done for us to get back in it, it is absolutely on them to finish the job in the second half. The biggest weakness since they've been together is finishing strong and handling the pressure that's all about to come back down on them, especially after the incessant "they should be all-stars" talk. It's time for them to change the narrative if they really want to ascend to the next level. You're in a playoff spot, and the expectations are now holding on to that spot, and anything less is a disappointment. The second series out of the break is the Atlanta Braves, and we will talk, and there will be talk about the first wild card spot and revenge for 2022. You say all the time expectations change, and when you finish the first half the way they did, and in the spot they did, the pressure now falls squarely on your appointed co-captains for the first time since they've been together to finish the effing job. This is not unrealistic for me to set the bar at this level, and it's time for them to finally make their mark. I won't believe it until I see it, as they've been here and have had more than enough chances to prove that they can handle the situation. It's not me being negative to hold them to this standard. It's time they rise to the occasion. So, lot of stuff on that. Let me start with this. Expectations do change. And I completely agree with you. Obviously, coming into the season, we all had very different views on what we thought the Mets were. I think most Met fans didn't think they were a playoff team. Most people on my radio station didn't think they were a playoff team. That's okay. It's a prediction. It's sports. Most of the time, we're wrong. But as a season goes on, your expectations begin to change. And I would think, I don't care how negative of a Met fan you were, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who fit that bill, considering where they are now in a playoff spot, when you look at the teams they're competing with, St. Louis, San Diego, Arizona, when you look at those teams and you look at the Mets and you look at the way they've played over the last how many games, really the last 36 games, I completely agree. I think now as a Met fan, the belief is they better make the freaking playoffs. And I felt that coming into the season. I think in the world we live in, any year that doesn't feature a playoff berth is going to feel like a massive disappointment. But I think that's elevated even more now. They're in a playoff spot. Go do it. So I agree with expectations changing. I don't necessarily, and Dan didn't say this, but he sort of implied this. I don't look at, hey, if they don't catch Atlanta, it's a massive disappointment. I would be very surprised if they catch Atlanta. The fact that they're within striking distance, the fact that they do have those 4 games against the Braves coming up, it's actually not the second series back from the break. It's the third series back from the break. The Mets will play the Marlins for 4. It's a wraparound series, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 2 games against the Yankees, the second portion of the Subway Series, and then they play Atlanta for 4. I don't think catching the Braves is a must. It'd be nice. I mean, geez, wild card series at Citi Field, sign me up. Even if it didn't work out that well 2 years ago. It's making the playoffs. That's the bar. Wild card 2, wild card 3, doesn't freaking matter. It's making the playoffs. And I definitely agree with that assessment that that's the new bar. Is it on Brandon Nimmo and Francisco Lindor? I don't think it's squarely on them, but yeah, they're their best players. They had all-star first halves, right? Lindor's the $300 million man. That never changes. He's always going to have high expectations. But I think the other guy that has high expectations is Pete Alonso. Pete did not have a great first half. His numbers are pedestrian. That's basically what they are right now. 19 home runs, 51 RBIs, a 240-ish batting average, 250-ish batting average. It's not great. And most of his hits have just not been that impactful. I'll be the first to tell you that. So if we're making a list on guys that need to perform big, that guys that you need big second halves from, of course, the all-stars, this should be all-stars, are going to have high bars. But I would also put that on Pete Alonso as well. I would definitely say that. Let's hear from Nick. Nick writes, it sounds like Starling Marte isn't close to being back. With that the case, they need to do something with the outfield. You cannot have Tyrone Taylor or DJ Stewart in there every day. Getting an outfielder has now become a priority approaching the deadline. They should add a bat in the outfield. Absolutely. I completely agree. They should replace DJ Stewart. For now, Jeff McNeil plays every day in right field. That's what I would do for now. I think you also have the option of looking down at Brett Beatty and asking a very fair question. And I'm going to ask this question because I had a guy, I should find the email, pissed at me for continuing to bring up Brett Beatty at second base. I think he called me a name and said, Evan, you're stupid. Why do you keep bringing up Brett Beatty at second base? I bring up Brett Beatty at second base because he's playing second base. Like Brett Beatty is not doing it every single day, but he's doing it a lot. I was checking the kind of the game logs to see how often is he playing it. It's like once every 3 or 4 days. So my question, because I don't know the answer, is how many times does he have to play second base? And what do they need to say or see from him at second base before they say, you know what? He's hitting at AAA. We know he can hit, or at least we think we could hit at the major league level. There are at-bats for him. let him play second base. Now, that also blocks Jose Iglesias, but look, I think Iglesias for now with this roster and the way he's been hitting should play every day. I don't think it's crazy to think that there's going to be a time in the next month where we're not going to want to see him play every day at second base. So my question around Beatty is, they obviously are continuing the experiment. He's continuing to play out there. At what point do they have the confidence to call him up and kind of get him into this routine of getting his bat in the lineup by sticking him at second base?
I think well, first of all, I think the guy might have called you a moron, if I'm correct. Was that what the nickname was? The guy
Yeah, it may have been a moron. I have to find. We have a lot of emails, so I lose it sometimes. My apologies.
But I think I might have to agree with this guy. Since Brett Beatty has stopped playing every day and then got sent down, basically, I think it was May 28th or May 29th, officially, when Vientos took over, the Mets are 27-12. You want to bring Brett Beatty up here for what?
Well, I just told you, because they have a hole in their lineup. Like right now, the hole in their lineup is who's getting the at-bats that Starling Marte lost, or Starling Marte would have gotten by playing right field. Right now, the best choice is Iglesias as the answer, with Jeff McNeil playing right field. But Jeff McNeil is still not a guy, despite him getting the RBI double on Sunday, that we're all like begging to see every day. So it's finding who should get those at-bats. And while Brett Beatty can't play right field, there are ways where Brett Beatty can get some of those at-bats if he's able to play second base. Capiche?
No, I get that idea. I get that philosophy, but he can't hit in the majors. So
we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet.
I've witnessed him enough to see that he can't adjust. He's too nervous. I mean, he made a point of it, saying that I think it was last year, he felt the pressure. He was a little uncomfortable. Like, he right now is not fit for this role. Why put him back in there?
Because he's probably, despite all of that, and despite the fact that you may be right, he'll never hit in the major leagues, because offensively, he's a better option than DJ Stewart. That's why.
Well, but nobody's disagreeing with that.
Well, then what? Then when you ask why wouldn't you want him up here? That's why. Is he better than DJ Stewart? That's the guy he'd be replacing.
But why not go get better? Why not go make a trade? That should be what they're doing.
Yeah, obviously, I prefer that. I mean, Jesse Winker is added to this roster, great. But until they do that, until that happens, which may not occur right up until July 30th, that's better for the roster. Look, they're going to come back on July 19th. Okay? There's still a week and a half before the trade deadline. I agree with you that right now it's add 2 more relievers, 2, specifically a lefty, and then just anybody who can get people out, and then go get an outfielder. I'm with you on that. But until then, Brett Beatty should be on this roster over DJ Stewart, but it won't happen until they have some level of confidence that he can play second base at the major league level. And clearly they don't, because they haven't made the call yet.
I don't disagree about the DJ Stewart factor, but that guy I think is going to be on this roster until the trade deadline, and then they're going to cut him. I think that's what's going to happen.
You may be right. Richard writes, what's wrong with J.D. Martinez? Ever since the episode with his shoes, he's looked lost at the plate. Where's the professional hitter? He may be hurt. I mean, remember that episode with the shoes also kind of led to him having like a foot issue. He missed 1 game and then he came back. So it could be 2 things. I hope he's not hurt, but could also just simply be he's slumping. You know, we saw that last at-bat on Sunday. He's just not in a great groove right now, and they're going to need to get him going. David writes, great job with the podcast, guys. Appreciate you guys putting in the time. So with Starling Marte coming back, eventually the Mets need that 4th or 5th outfielder. We're talking about it right now. Hopefully a lefty not named DJ Stewart. I do not want Brett Beatty. See, he's with you, Hoff. I'd rather him stay in the minors developing. We also need a relief pitcher. I got the perfect deal. I'd call the Toronto Blue Jays and try to get a package for Chad Green and Dalton Varsho. Varsho is a good outfielder that could be a 3rd catcher with some pop. Green is a proven reliever. I don't think it would cost a boatload, but yes, we're going to have to give up something because of the control. Maybe, like I mentioned, a guy like Brett Beatty and Kevin Parada, but I don't think you would have to give any of your top prospects. What do you guys think of that? Well, first of all, Chad Green, a guy who can pitch in New York. We already know that. a guy who's pitched pretty well out of the Toronto Blue Jay bullpen this season. I think he's essentially become their closer because of the injury to Jordan Romano. So Chad Green, by the way, here are his numbers. I wanted to pull them up. 2.19 ERA, 24 innings. His FIP is very high, which is a little concerning that maybe he's pitching to some very, very good luck. He's got 23 strikeouts in 24 innings, 9 walks. He has allowed 5 home runs, which is a lot. But look, sometimes you just have to say, is he better than what they currently have? And the answer is yes. So number one, Chad Green certainly would be a nice fit out of the bullpen. And they're going nowhere, the Toronto Blue Jays. Dalton Varsho's having a terrible season. He's also under team control, not making a lot of money for a couple of years. And remember, when the Blue Jays acquired Dalton Varsho a couple of years ago, they gave up a lot. They gave up Lourdes Gurriel. They gave up Gab Moreno, the catcher. So I don't know, even with them having a bad year, with him having team control until 2027, with him having a down year, with him still only being 27, 28 years old, I'm not sure they trade him, but even if they did, which I wouldn't be stunned about, they're probably going to want a big return. I would disagree that would be a cheap return. Think about it. 28 years old, 3 years of control. He's not having a great season. I think we believe he's better than the numbers he's actually put up this year, or at least slightly, because he wasn't great last year either. Really, it was 2 years ago. It was that last year in Arizona. He also became a fantasy darling because of his catching qualifications. But the Blue Jays are a good team to look at because of the fact that they are falling out of it. It took a few weeks, but I think when now you look around baseball, you can clearly see the teams that are out of it, the teams that are likely to sell, the teams, and then you can start looking at their roster saying, okay, this fits, that fits, that fits, this fits. But it'll be interesting over the next few weeks to see how aggressive they get in going out there and adding bullpen help, because they need bullpen help. I mean, even in the wins, you saw it on Friday night, even in the wins, it's tedious. It's tough, man, getting those last 6 outs. Like, sometimes they'll get great starting pitching, and they're still desperate to get those 6 outs out of the bullpen. But you know what? This is a perfect time of year. This is probably as, I guess, relaxed as I am going into an all-star break, because the Mets have played such great baseball. They're in a wild card spot. It's still a very pleasant surprise, and it's a chance to take a big, deep breath before things get very interesting. I know I will say this, and we'll do a few Ricos, obviously, going into the second half of the year, including our recap on the best wins of the first half of the season and the worst losses of the first half of the season. But going into the second half of the year on Friday night in Miami, much like the Colorado series here at City and the Washington series here at City, I said they got to do damage. They got to beat this team up, man. They've got to take advantage of the fact that they are not playing good teams and they're doing it in their own building. They have got to take advantage of the Marlins, because the schedule, which the Mets, to their credit, has taken advantage of, playing a lot of mediocre to bad teams, it's about to stiffen in the second half of the season. Miami is your, I don't want to say respite, but it's your last chance to kind of feast, to kind of eat. And so I look at that series in Miami, a team the Mets have not destroyed yet quite this season. They're 3-3 in the 6 games against Miami. And remember, they were very fortunate to win the last game they won, the game that really helped kind of put the winning together, the game-winning home run that was hit against the Marlins by J.D. Martinez. They have 4 games against Miami. I think they got to win 3 out of 4. Mets have not done that yet this season. They've played 4 4-game series, and they have split all of them so far this season. So priority number 1, they got to come out of the break, and they've got to win 3 against Miami. But listen to where this schedule goes after this game against Miami, or this series against Miami. They got 2 games against the Yankees, who, despite their brutal loss to the Orioles on Sunday, you have to think they're waking up. And they did win 2 out of 3 against the Orioles, and they're right there in the American League East. 2 games at Yankee Stadium. I'd be thrilled with a split. 4 games at Citi Field against Atlanta. 3 games at Citi Field against Minnesota. Not an easy homestand. Then they go on a 4-city West Mountain road trip. 3 in Anaheim against the Angels. Okay, fine. Crappy team, but still 3 games in California. A single game in St. Louis. Remember, that game got rained out, and that is going to be a freaking playoff game because the Mets and the Cardinals are tied 3-3 in their season series. Let me confirm if that's true. 2-0, 3. No, actually, let me take that back. The Mets are up 3-2 in the season series against St. Louis. So if they win the game against the Cardinals, win the season series. If they lose the game against the Cardinals, I got to go to the second tiebreaker. I'm not sure. Then they got 3 in Colorado. That'll wear out your pitching staff. And then 3 in Seattle against the, as of right now, first place Seattle Mariners. That is a very tough stretch. That is a 10-game road trip in 4 different cities after you play the Yankees, the Braves, and the Twins. Not an easy stretch. And that is why these 4 games against the Miami Marlins coming out of the All-Star break, very, very important. Good homestand, good first half. Let it sink in. The New York Mets are a playoff team as of right now with a lot of work to do. We will take all of your thoughts, whether it's via voicemail or email. We will peruse them and we will answer them when we come back in the next couple of days, because we got an all-star break. We got time to chill and relax. The RicoB@gmail.com is the email address. The number is 725-222-8699. Remember, during the all-star break, we've got our 10 worst losses of the first half of the year and our 10 best wins of the first half of the year, all to look forward to. We appreciate you listening, downloading, and being a loyal subscriber of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.